Hello and welcome to the Sgraffito tutorial. I am going to try and follow along what's happening on the screen. This is a voiceover because the first recording had terrible sound quality. So what you're seeing right now is the pinch pot that I created to show you this demo. It is leather hard, which means I can mark it with my nail, and there is a little mark that happens and I'm still able to wipe that away. I can handle it without it being crushed in my hands. It's firm, but you can still see that it's wet because, as you can see on the inside, it is still a dark colored tone, but the form wouldn't change without cracking. It's got 4 coats of underglaze on it, which is mostly dry. It's not completely dry yet, but it's ideal for doing what you need to do when you carve sgraffito, which is scrape through the underglaze to get to the underlying clay. You can do this when it's bone dry, but it's not ideal. It is much more difficult, and you tend to get flaking that happens with the clay, which can be hard to incorporate into a design. So try to catch it at the right stage. That's one of your challenges for this project, is catching it at the right stage. Now, you can see I have a selection of tools there that I'm going to make different marks with, and I'm going to just do a very simple design around the band. That tool that I'm holding right now has more of an oval shape to it. I can make a couple of different kinds of marks with that. As you can see, the little round loop on the table, that's good for making perfect circles. And there it is. And the other one that's on the table there has a very sharp edge, sorry, a very sharp angle, which is really good for carving lines. So try out all of your tools, see what kinds of marks they make. With the round one, the first thing I'm going to show you is how to make a perfect little tiny circle. It's very satisfying. All you do with that is twist it into the surface of the underglaze. Don't press too hard though if your clay is still a little bit soft, because you can go right through if your wall is thin especially, and you don't want to do that. The degree to which you press on it when you are using these tools is going to affect obviously the depth of the mark, so keep that in mind. Now, when I started this, I didn't really have an idea of the design I wanted to do. I'm kind of winging it right now. So while I put those little circles there, you're going to see on the screen other examples of sgraffito, these great examples of sgraffito. Once you know what you're doing, especially if you are solid on your drawing skills, you can do stuff like this. It's very fun and whimsical, and it's just using 2 tones and the level of the original color that you start with, scraping down into the clay that locks in your design. So you can see that some of it is pictorial, some of it is completely based on geometric design or abstract pattern. You should go simple with this particular exercise right here. This is meant to be fairly simple. So keep it simple. Later on, you can get more complex as you get more comfortable with it. So you can see that I've come all the way around with the circles now, and I spaced them really badly. If I was going to do this for real on a cup that I really wanted to keep, I would have to measure first. And the way that you would do that is to take a look at your rim, divide it into 4 equal little marks that are across from each other, north, south, east, and west, and then go from there in the middle of each of those marks, and then line up the circles with the marks on the rim. That's one way that you can do it. I don't recommend really using a ruler because it's hard to wrap it around the curved surface. And what I'm going to do now on the pot is go in with that tool that has that really sharp angle and vary my design a little bit. So I'm going to use some linear marks. And my thought process is to really abstractly and simply think of a landscape. So whenever I see little circular marks like that, it always reminds me of the moon and the sun, maybe stars. So I'm thinking about landscapes and simplifying really simple mountain shapes in between there. When you think about design, every time you sit down to think about design, in a really simple nutshell, harmony is achieved by using repetition and variation. What you repeat are your motifs, single motif or multiple motifs, but there has to be some cohesiveness to your plan. Otherwise, it just looks really random and amateur. If you repeat too much, it's boring, and that's where the variation comes in. So you take the idea of the motif and you change it. It's like variations on a theme. Like if you're listening to a musical composition and you hear the same motifs over and over again, but they're picked up by different instruments, so they have different tones and different sounds, and other things about them are changed, but you have maybe the same melody. It's very similar with visual composition. You use the same motifs and you vary them as you repeat them. Repetition plus variation equals harmony and a cohesive feeling to your project. And a cohesive feeling gives it a planned feeling. It makes you look like you know what you're doing. So, now these little mountain shapes, as I go around, are going to start to spice it up a little bit. It's still going to be a little bit too simple, so I'm going to add something else once I get to the end of that. Be sure that you try multiple tools. You don't have to try every tool in your kit, but try them out enough to be confident that you know what they do and what it feels like when you actually do Sgraffito. Again, one of the big tests of this project, I'm not grading it, but for you personally, just to know the different stages of clay, catch it at the right stage. Understand what leather hard means and what it looks like and what it feels like, because it's going to be a really important stage for you to recognize when you do things like attach pieces of clay together. When you attach two pieces of clay together, they need to be at the same stage of dryness, and ideally they should both be leather hard, because that's going to give you the most success. Now, what I'm noticing right here is that the design changed quite a bit as I went around in terms of height. So now I'm adjusting my initial shape to match more of the last shape that meets it when they come together. Again, if I were doing this in more of a comprehensive way, I would have drawn a really, really light line around the top and bottom of the band that I wanted to establish to draw the design in. That contains it a lot better and keeps me from looking like I'm winging it. So I would recommend doing the same thing if this is, if you think this is going to be something you really want to keep. If it's a throwaway, then don't worry about it, right? But it's always a good idea to do things like you mean it, like to make things look like you meant to do them. So, and why make something if you don't really want to keep it? So, but that's up to you. Those little hash marks I'm making now are staying within the motif of the mountain, but varying it and giving it a little bit of asymmetrical balance. So just a little bit of maybe implied movement inside those mountain shapes. If you're looking for inspiration to come up with your own designs, not that you have to, but if you want to, I would recommend going to check out other kinds of pre-existing pottery, either modern day or historical. You can find a lot of inspiration looking at things like Minoan pottery, Chinese pottery, although that tends to be a little bit more complex. There's some great Native American visual motifs that you can find. There's some great, very similar looking, actually very simplified geometric abstract patterns that you can find in a lot of African cultures, their traditional types of pottery. So go ahead and Google a bunch of stuff and just look around for some inspiration. You might even have, a shirt that has a design on it or shoes that have design on it. Get your inspiration from anywhere that you can. Design is all around you every day, and you may not even realize it. There's industrial design, but there's also pattern design on stuff that you might have just lying around on your desk. But if you don't see something around you, look stuff up. You'll be doing a lot more of that later on as we delve a little bit deeper into surface decoration. But for now, like I said, keep it simple. Start to find stuff that appeals to you so that you already have some go-to cultures later on that you can develop more into your own motifs inspired by those pre-existing styles. That about brings us to the end of your Sgraffito demo. Thank you so much for watching.